The cozy apartment in Portland, Oregon, hummed with the gentle rhythm of a Sunday morning, the scent of cinnamon rolls wafting from the kitchen. Clara Bennett, a 34-year-old literature professor at Portland State University, arranged a stack of classic novels on her bookshelf. Jane Austen, Emily Bronte, her favorites. Her space was a sanctuary of order, with neatly framed photos of her and her husband, Ethan, lining the walls. Clara thrived on structure, finding solace in the predictability of her routine. She loved her mornings with a cup of chamomile tea, her evenings lost in poetry, and her weekends grading papers. Ethan, a 36-year-old civil engineer, was her perfect counterbalance, a man of numbers and blueprints, grounded in logic where Clara danced in imagination. Their differences didn't divide them. They wove their lives together like threads in a tapestry. Every Sunday, Ethan would kiss Clara goodbye and drive the 50 miles to his parents' farm in the Willamette Valley. It was a ritual they'd kept for years, a quiet tradition that brought them closer to his roots. He'd help with chores, fixing the barn, tending the vegetable garden, while Clara packed a basket of her homemade goodies for him to take. Jars of peach preserves, containers of hearty beef stew, and freshly baked apple pies filled the basket, each item a labor of love. Ethan's parents adored Clara's cooking, always sending back heartfelt thanks through him. When Ethan returned in the evening, his flannel shirt dusted with dirt, he'd share stories of the farm, his dad's latest tractor troubles, the neighbor's prize-winning pumpkins, the crisp fall air. Clara listened, her eyes soft, asking questions as they sipped hot cocoa by the fireplace. These Sundays were their bridge to a simpler world, a world of peace and family. But lately, Clara had noticed a change in Ethan. He was still the man she loved, the one who brought her coffee in bed, read her favorite poems at night, and held her hand during walks in the park. Yet, there was a shadow in his hazel eyes, a quiet unease that lingered even in their happiest moments. He'd stare out the window, his jaw tight, as if waiting for something, or someone. Clara chalked it up to stress. Ethan was overseeing a major bridge project, a $20 million contract that kept him up late with calculations. She tried to ease his burden, cooking his favorite meals, leaving little notes in his lunch, hoping her care would lift the weight he carried. But the shadow remained, a silent question mark in their otherwise perfect life. One crisp Saturday morning, Clara woke with a spark of inspiration. Ethan had mentioned a late meeting with his team, so he wouldn't be visiting the farm this weekend. A sudden urge bubbled inside her. She wanted to surprise his parents herself, to deliver the basket of treats she'd prepared earlier in the week. She imagined their delighted faces, the warmth of their hugs, the chance to breathe the fresh country air. It would be a little adventure, a break from the city's gray hustle. Clara smiled at the thought, her heart light. She slipped out of bed, her slippers padding softly on the hardwood floor, and headed to the kitchen. The fridge held jars of her homemade raspberry jam, a batch of oatmeal cookies, and a container of smoked sausages, Ethan's parents' favorites. She packed them carefully into a wicker basket, wrapping the cookies in a checkered cloth to keep them fresh. Clara dressed in jeans, a cozy sweater, and a scarf to ward off the October chill. She glanced out the window. The sky was a brilliant blue, the sun filtering through golden leaves. Grabbing her basket and car keys, she stepped outside to their trusty Subaru, parked in the driveway. She loaded the basket into the trunk, making sure nothing would tip over, then slid into the driver's seat. As the engine purred to life, Clara felt a thrill of excitement. She loved surprises, loved seeing joy in others' eyes. But as she pulled onto the highway, heading toward the farm, she had no idea that this trip would unravel a secret that would shatter her world. The Subaru hummed along the winding highway out of Portland, Oregon, as Clara Bennett, 34, drove toward the Willamette Valley, a wicker basket of homemade treats nestled in the trunk. The Saturday morning sun cast a golden glow over the rolling hills, painting the autumn trees in shades of amber and crimson. Clara's heart felt light. She was on her way to surprise her in-laws, a plan she'd hatched that morning to bring a little joy to their weekend. Her husband, Ethan, a 36-year-old civil engineer, had a late meeting, so he couldn't make his usual Sunday trip to their farm 50 miles away. Clara saw it as the perfect chance to step in, imagining the delight on their faces when she arrived with jars of raspberry jam, oatmeal cookies, and smoked sausages. She smiled, picturing their warm hugs, their praise for her cooking, and the chance to escape the city for a few hours of fresh air and family. The drive was peaceful, the scenery a balm to Clara's soul. Fields stretched out on either side, dotted with bales of hay, while the distant mountains stood tall against the horizon. She turned on the radio, soft jazz filling the car, and sang along to Ella Fitzgerald, her voice light and carefree. The 2-hour journey felt like a mini vacation, a rare break from her routine of grading papers and lecturing on classic literature at Portland State University. Clara loved these trips with Ethan, his stories of the farm, the quiet simplicity of his parents' life. But today, she'd get to experience it on her own. She imagined sitting at their rustic kitchen table, sipping tea, catching up on village gossip, and soaking in the warmth of their little wooden cottage with its flower-filled garden. As she turned onto the familiar dirt road leading to the farm, Clara's excitement grew. She recognized the hand-painted mailbox, the old oak tree by the gate, the carved window frames of the cottage. It had been a while since her last visit, but the place felt like a second home. She parked by the fence, the gravel crunching under her tires, and stepped out, smoothing her scarf. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of hay and wildflowers. Clara grabbed the basket from the trunk, her heart racing with anticipation. She couldn't wait to see the surprise on their faces, to hear their laughter, to share a moment of connection. But as she walked toward the house, her steps faltered, her breath catching in her throat. On the porch stood Ethan, his flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows, his laughter soft, as he spoke to a woman Clara didn't recognize. She was in her late 20s, her auburn hair tied back, her smile warm as she looked at Ethan. In her arms was a boy no older than 4, his curly hair a mirror of Ethan's. The child broke free, running to Ethan with a giggle, wrapping his tiny arms around Ethan's legs. "Daddy," he squealed, looking up with adoration. Ethan crouched down, ruffling the boy's hair, his face lighting up with a tenderness Clara had never seen directed at her. "Hey, buddy," he said, his voice soft, pulling the boy into a hug. The woman, Elena, as Clara would later learn, watched with a quiet fondness, a shared history evident in her gaze. Clara froze, the basket slipping in her hands, her world tilting on its axis. This wasn't a casual visit, a friendly chat with a neighbor. This was intimacy, a connection deeper than she could fathom. Ethan's laughter, the boy's voice calling him daddy, the woman's gentle smile, it all painted a picture Clara couldn't unsee. Her heart pounded, her vision blurring as a wave of nausea hit. She stumbled back, her legs trembling, unable to process the scene before her. This wasn't just a secret. It was a betrayal, a hidden life Ethan had kept from her. As the truth sank in, Clara knew she couldn't face him. Not yet. She needed answers, but first she needed to escape the storm of emotions threatening to swallow her whole. The golden October light filtering through the trees felt like a cruel mockery, as Clara Bennett, 34, stood frozen on the dirt path leading to her in-laws' farm in the Willamette Valley. Her wicker basket of homemade treats, raspberry jam, oatmeal cookies, smoked sausages, slipped from her hands, landing with a soft thud on the grass. Just moments ago, she'd been brimming with excitement, eager to surprise Ethan's parents with a visit. But now, her world shattered as she watched her husband Ethan on the porch of the quaint wooden cottage. The 36-year-old civil engineer, who she thought was at a late meeting in Portland, was here, laughing softly, his flannel shirt rolled up, his hazel eyes warm with a tenderness she'd never seen directed at her. Beside him stood a woman, her auburn hair tied back, and in her arms was a boy, no older than 4, with curly hair just like Ethan's. "Daddy," the boy squealed, breaking free from the woman's arms and running to Ethan, wrapping his tiny arms around Ethan's legs. Ethan crouched down, ruffling the child's hair, his smile wide and genuine. "Hey, buddy," he said, his voice soft, pulling the boy into a hug. The woman, later revealed as Elena, watched with a quiet fondness, her gaze holding a shared history that pierced Clara's heart. This wasn't a casual encounter, a friendly chat with a neighbor. It was intimacy, a connection that spoke of years, of secrets, of a life Ethan had hidden from her. Clara's breath caught, her chest tightening as the realization hit. This was Ethan's other family, a wife, a son, a world she'd never been part of. Her vision blurred, tears stinging her eyes as her legs trembled beneath her. She stumbled back, the basket forgotten, her mind a whirlwind of betrayal. How could he? How could Ethan, the man who brought her coffee each morning, who read poetry to her at night, who held her hand through life's storms, how could he do this? Memories flashed through her mind, moments that now felt like lies. His Sunday trips to the farm, 50 miles away, his late returns, the shadow in his eyes she dismissed as work stress. It all formed a painful picture. She'd ignored the signs, blinded by her love, her trust. But now the truth was undeniable, a jagged knife in her heart. Clara turned, her feet moving before her mind could catch up, and ran back to her Subaru. She fumbled with the door, her hands shaking, and slammed it shut behind her. The engine roared to life as she gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Tears streamed down her face, blurring the road as she pulled onto the dirt path, driving blindly away from the farm. Her sobs came in waves, raw and uncontrollable, each one a cry of betrayal. "How could he?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "How could he do this to me?" She thought of their wedding day, their vows, their dreams of a future together. All of it felt like a cruel illusion now, a house of cards that had collapsed in an instant. The 2-hour drive back to Portland stretched into an eternity, the autumn landscape a haze through her tears. Clara's mind raced, replaying every moment of their life together, searching for clues she'd missed. Ethan's late nights, his distracted stares, the way he'd pull away when she asked about his day. It all made sense now, a puzzle she'd been too naive to solve. The jazz on the radio felt like a taunt, its cheerful notes clashing with the storm in her heart. She pulled over to a rest stop, her hands still trembling, and buried her face in them, sobbing until her throat ached. The pain was a living thing, clawing at her chest, threatening to swallow her whole. But beneath the hurt, a spark of determination flickered. She needed answers, needed to understand how deep this betrayal ran, and what it meant for their future. The autumn leaves rustled softly in the breeze as Clara Bennett, 34, drove back to the Willamette Valley, her Subaru kicking up dust on the familiar dirt road. It had been 3 days since she'd fled her in-laws' farm, her heart shattered by the sight of her husband Ethan with another woman and a child. His child. The image of Ethan, 36, crouching down to hug the 4-year-old boy, his hazel eyes brimming with a tenderness Clara had never seen, haunted her. She'd spent those days in a fog of pain, crying until her tears ran dry, her mind a storm of betrayal and questions. But now, Clara needed answers. Needed to understand the depth of Ethan's secret life. She couldn't confront him, not yet, so she returned to the farm, this time under a guise, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and resolve. Clara parked a safe distance from the cottage, her hands trembling as she smoothed her scarf. She concocted a story. She was a historian researching rural architecture. A flimsy excuse, but it would get her through the door. Stepping out, she took a deep breath, the crisp air biting her cheeks, and walked toward the gate. The woman she'd seen before, Elena, as she'd learned, stood in the garden, tending to a bed of marigolds. She was in her late 20s, her auburn hair tied back, her face weary but kind. "Hello," Clara said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I heard your house has some unique history. I'm studying local architecture." Elena looked up, her eyes curious but not hostile. "Come in," she said, opening the gate. "I'm Elena." Inside, the cottage smelled of fresh bread and baby formula, its simplicity a stark contrast to Clara's polished Portland apartment. A boy, Sasha, Elena introduced him, played in the corner with a toy truck, his curly hair a mirror of Ethan's. "Nice to meet you, Sasha," Clara said, her voice catching as she fought to keep her composure. They sat at the kitchen table, Elena pouring tea, the steam rising in lazy curls. Clara, under the fake name Lydia, studied Elena, searching for the femme fatale she'd imagined. But Elena was just a mother, tired but gentle, her eyes carrying a quiet sorrow. "Have you lived here long?" Clara asked, her voice casual, though her heart raced. "A few years," Elena replied, her tone soft. "Ethan helps out a lot. He comes every Sunday." Clara's breath hitched at the name, but she pressed on. "I saw you with him a few days ago," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I'm his wife." Elena's cup paused midair, her expression shifting to one of understanding, not surprise. "I see," she said, setting the cup down. "He didn't tell you." Clara's eyes burned, but she held Elena's gaze. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why didn't he tell me?" Elena sighed, her face etched with regret. "You'd have to ask him," she said. "But I think he was scared of losing you." Clara's throat tightened. "Do you love him?" she asked, dreading the answer. Elena gave a sad smile. "I did once, deeply, but that was years ago. Now we share Sasha, nothing more. Ethan's here as a father, a friend, not a lover." Her voice held a sincerity Clara couldn't deny. "He loves Sasha more than anything," Elena added, glancing at the boy. "He's a wonderful dad." Clara looked at Sasha, his innocent smile piercing her heart. "And Ethan, is he happy?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Elena sighed. "I don't know. He's torn, between two lives. He loves you, but he's afraid of hurting you, of losing Sasha." Clara's mind reeled, the weight of Elena's words sinking in. "What about me?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Doesn't he care how much this hurts me?" Elena nodded. "He does, but he hoped you'd never find out. It was naive." Days later, Clara returned to Portland, her heart heavy but resolute. She confronted Ethan that night, his face paling as she said, "I was with Elena. He didn't deny it, his voice halting as he explained. A brief romance before they met, Sasha's birth, his fear of losing Clara if he told her. "I never stopped loving you," he said, his eyes pleading. "I just didn't know how to be honest." Clara's heart ached, but she needed time to decide. Could she forgive him, or was this the end? The Portland apartment was cloaked in the soft light of dawn as Clara Bennett, 34, stood by the window, a cup of chamomile tea warming her hands. It had been a week since she'd confronted her husband, Ethan, about his secret life, a son, Sasha, and a past with Elena, uncovered during a surprise visit to his parents' farm in the Willamette Valley. The 36-year-old civil engineer had broken down, admitting his fear of losing Clara had kept him silent. The revelation had shattered her, but after days of reflection at a quiet cabin 30 miles outside the city, Clara made a choice, not to leave, but to stay. "I'm staying," she'd told Ethan, her voice steady but firm. "But this doesn't mean I've forgiven you. We need to rebuild trust together." Ethan had nodded, his eyes brimming with gratitude and guilt, ready to do whatever it took. Clara knew healing wouldn't be easy. The pain of Ethan's betrayal lingered, a dull ache in her chest. But she also saw the man she loved, the one who'd read her poetry, who'd built a life with her, who'd cared for his son out of duty, not malice. She couldn't erase the hurt, but she could choose to face it, to understand it, to find a path forward. That path led them back to the farm, a place that had once broken her, but now held the promise of reconciliation. On a crisp Sunday morning, Clara and Ethan drove the 50 miles to the Willamette Valley, a wicker basket in the trunk filled with her homemade treats, blueberry preserves, pecan pies, and smoked sausages. This time, it wasn't just for Ethan's parents. It was for Elena and Sasha, a gesture of peace, a step toward acceptance. They pulled up to the familiar wooden cottage, its garden blooming with late-season roses. Clara's heart raced as she stepped out, the basket heavy in her hands. Ethan squeezed her hand, his touch a quiet reassurance. Elena emerged from the house, her auburn hair catching the sunlight, her face lighting up with a cautious smile. "I knew you'd come," she said, her voice warm but tentative. Sasha, the 4-year-old boy who'd called Ethan Daddy, peeked out from behind her, his curious eyes studying Clara. "This is Clara," Elena said, kneeling beside him. "She's Ethan's wife." Clara's throat tightened, but she smiled back. "Hi, Sasha," she said, her voice soft. "I brought you something." She opened the basket, revealing the treats, and handed it to Elena. "For you," she said, her gesture a bridge across the chasm of pain. Elena took the basket, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick. "Come inside, I'll make tea." They stepped into the cottage, the smell of fresh bread and baby formula filling the air. Sasha trailed behind, his toy truck in hand, occasionally glancing at Clara with curiosity. They sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea, the conversation light, weather, the village, Sasha's love for trucks. Clara felt a strange duality, unease at being in the space of Ethan's other life, but also a quiet relief, a sense of clarity. She watched Sasha play, his laughter, a reminder of the innocence caught in this tangled web, and felt a flicker of warmth. This wasn't about erasing the past, it was about building something new, something honest. Ethan sat beside her, his hand resting on hers, his presence a silent promise to make things right. Clara knew the road ahead would be long. Trust would take time. Healing would take patience. But she'd chosen love over anger, understanding over bitterness. She looked at Elena, at Sasha, and saw not enemies, but a family tied to hers through Ethan's choices. This was her new reality, one she'd face with grace and strength. As they drove back to Portland that evening, the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold, Clara felt a weight lift. The journey wasn't over, but it had begun anew. Love, she realized, wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty, forgiveness, and the courage to rebuild. What would you do if faced with such a betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe for more tales of heartbreak and healing that remind us true love can endure even the deepest wounds. Next week, we're diving into another story that'll touch your heart. Don't miss it.